I'm going to talk a little bit about what's commonly referred to as Senate Bill 165, or substitute Senate Bill 165. Over about a year and a half to 2 year period, we were working on changes to the oil and gas law in Ohio. The oil and gas law, as Tom mentioned, is 1509, Chapter 1509 of the Revised Code. Over about a 1.5 year period, we worked on drafts. Mike McCormick was one of the authors of many of the drafts. I was one of the authors. One of our retired deputy chiefs helped author some of the language that went into the bill and then went for debate in front of the legislature. Senate Bill 165 passed and became an effective law on June 30th of 2010. We believe that this was the most significant change in oil and gas law since our agency created the Division of Oil and Gas in 1965. I'll give you a few of the highlights of changes in law. One of the things that was substantially strengthened through Senate Bill 165 were the enforceable standards for well construction. Now, it's particularly important because well construction and how a well is constructed or properly constructed is critical to safety and environmental protection. Another thing it did was it tightened time frames where a well may remain idle. For a number of reasons, a well might be drilled, and then at some point, maybe immediately, maybe sometime after the well was initially placed on production, a well can go idle. And Senate Bill 165 addressed that and gives very specific time frames and methods for a company to allow a well to be idle. Again, it's very important. There have potential environmental impacts. If a well remains idle too long, then there can be safety or environmental concerns with that. So this bill addressed those issues. The bill also increased notifications to landowners. The previous law had some language in it, especially for urban areas, that said landowners have to be notified. Frankly, that language was quite confusing, so we tried to take the confusing language out and just make a real simple notification as the wells are being proposed in an urban area. And the proposal in law says that the company has to notify before they submit to it. It lengthened time frames for permit issuance. Now, what that means is Ohio law says that once permit's received, it has to be reviewed in a timely manner, and there are specified time frames. In an urban area like Plain Township, it extended the previous time frames and lengthened them on the early end. In other words, we can't issue a permit before so many days, and then it lengthened the final day that we have to review and issue the permit. Now, again, that allows more input. It allows us to schedule time with the representatives of local communities or townships so that they can take part in one of the pre-site reviews that occurs before a permit is issued. So again, that is a good thing. It helps to have better public participation through local government, through the township or municipality. It mandated the pre-site inspections. Excuse me. Prior to Senate Bill 165, we made it a policy to go out and inspect every site where we received an application or we were receiving an application before we issued the permit. We would have people like Inspector Claus go out, look at the site, and then write up very specific standards or conditions for that particular site as a permit might be issued. As Mike mentioned, the inspector would then forward what he wanted on that location to the permitting staff, and then the staff would include those as conditions. Conditions are legally binding, so they're a legal requirement of a permit once it's issued. It shortened the restoration time frames. When wells are drilled, oftentimes an earthen pit with a liner in it might be used. Some of the site has to be bulldozed and the topsoil is stockpiled. And it shortened the time frames for the closure of the pit, and it shortened the time frames for the restoration of the properties. Again, a good environmental thing, and it also has some safety aspects to it as well. One of the things that was very important to us was a funding package. For quite a number of years, we've been having a significantly declining budget, and that limited the number of staff that we could have available to cause enforcement actions in oil and gas operations. So we put together a very, very detailed realignment plan or restructuring plan, that we want to get to a different point to more effectively enforce the law. With that, we came up with a budget scenario, and we projected how many new people we would need, what kind of positions they would have, and then built a budget around that. And I'm happy to say when we went through the legislative process on Senate Bill 165, we get 100% of the money that we had asked for. The increased revenue then allow us to have more diversified funding so that there's not any one fund that we're dependent on. So if that particular fund drops, it's going to hurt us. And it will allow us to hire new employees in the future. So that's a very quick summary of Senate Bill 165. There are many other changes that are in it, and I'm sure many of them will come up as we have a discussion.